Lost city buried beneath floods. Lost civilization beneath the flood. Discovery in Iraq may rewrite human history. Archaeologists may have uncovered evidence of an advanced civilization wiped out by a catastrophic flood 20,000 years ago, a finding that, if confirmed, could challenge the standard timeline of human history. Now, let's get into the thick of it in today's AI podcast episode.
Imagine for a moment that everything you thought you knew about human history, about when and how our civilizations really got started. What if that was about to be completely rewritten? What if there was a discovery, something that could push back the clock on humanity's story by thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of years? Today, we're diving right into that kind of possibility. It's pretty groundbreaking stuff. Our sources, especially this deep exploration called Beneath the Deluge, Echoes of a Lost Civilization, which digs into an article called Lost Civilization Buried by Ancient Flood, Discovery in Iraq Challenges Human History. They point to something really extraordinary. So our mission for this deep dive is clear. We're going to unpack some really compelling archaeological findings from a place you might think you know. Then we'll explore this provocative theory, about a potential global catastrophe. And finally, think about what all this means for the standard timeline of human civilization. This isn't just like old dirt we're talking about. It's potentially a huge aha moment for all of us. Okay, so let's start our journey in Iraq, right in the cradle of civilization, at a site called Tel Farah. It's famous, right? Long celebrated as this key Sumerian city-state, known for its role in, the rise of writing government cities, going back over 5,000 years. But what happens when you dig deeper?
Well, that's where it gets really fascinating. Because beneath those well-known Sumerian layers, excavations back in the 1930s found something, completely unexpected. They hit this thick, really distinct layer of yellow clay and sand.
Yellow clay, not just settlement stuff.
Exactly. This wasn't typical debris, broken pots and building remains or just river silt.
Mm-hmm.
The researchers, they identified it pretty clearly as an inundation layer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the geological signature of a massive flood, one that destroyed the city. And here's the kicker. This flood seems to have happened before the known Sumerian civilization that was built on top of it.
Wow. So, a flood so big, it left its own geological mark. And it essentially wiped the slate clean before the Sumerians we know about.
That's what it looks like. It basically erased whatever was there before.
Which raises the huge question, right? What was there? What did those earlier people leave behind before this massive flood?
Precisely. And, the archaeologist Eric Schmidt from the Penn Museum, he was overseeing those early digs.
Mm-hmm.
His questions back then are still, honestly, quite haunting. He wrote things like, has the rising of the waters completely destroyed towns, men, and beasts? You can almost hear the awe in that.
Yeah.
And he wondered, if no human remains are found, doesn't mean people fled before disaster struck. And maybe most importantly, do we see a total cultural break between what lies above and below the alluvial layer? These aren't just field notes. They point to a real deep mystery.
A cultural break. That's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? Because they did find things below that flood layer at Tel Farah, artifacts. And these weren't just simple nomadic tools.
No, not at all. That's what's so compelling. Below that inundation layer, the excavations turned up protocuneiform tablets.
Protocuneiform. So really early writing attempts.
Exactly. Foundational stuff. Predating the more complex Sumerian script. And along with those, painted jars, really quite beautiful, and these distinctive Ferretu-style bowls. These bowls show a certain level of artistic and technical skill for the period.
Okay.
So yeah, these aren't the kinds of things you'd expect from simple hunter-gatherers or just a temporary camp. It strongly suggests a surprisingly advanced society was there before the flood hit. And if you look at the contrast, between the stuff below the flood layer and the Sumerian stuff above, it really does hint at an abrupt cultural break. Almost like one civilization was just gone, wiped away, and then later another one started up in the same place.
That just screams ancient legends, doesn't it? My mind immediately jumps to the Sumerian text. They talk about Uruk,
which is believed to be Tel Farah, yes.
Right, and they describe it as a city that existed before the Great Flood, the home of Zusuja, their version of Noah. It feels almost too perfect a match.
It's a striking connection, absolutely. Okay. If this interpretation of Tel Farah holds up, it means sites like Tel Farah and maybe maybe Kish, they might actually hold physical proofs of that same massive flood remembered in the myths.
So the myths might not just be stories.
Exactly. It challenges that idea that they're purely allegorical and suggests they could be, collective memories, echoes of a real devastating event.
Myths as history. Wow. But okay, here's the big question then. Was this just a massive flood in Mesopotamia, a really bad local disaster, or something bigger? The sources seem to hint at more.
That's the crucial next step. How widespread was this? Because, interestingly, similar thick, destructive flood layers haven't just been found at Tel Fara. They've been identified at other major ancient sites, too.
Where else?
Well, definitely at Ur and Kish, also in Mesopotamia. Then you look further afield, at Harappa, in the Indus Valley.
Really? Harappa, too?
Yes. Archaeologists there have found distinct layers of alluvial deposit, thick mud, sand cutting across settlement layers, signs of sudden, catastrophic flooding. It sounds eerily similar to Tel Fara. And even in some ancient Nile settlements in Egypt, there's evidence pointing to unusual destructive floods, more than just the typical annual inundation.
Okay, so Mesopotamia, Indus Valley, Egypt. That starts to sound less like a local event.
Exactly. When you see this kind of pattern across such distances, you have to ask, could this have been, well, global?
A global flood. That's a huge idea. And this is where the independent researcher Matt LaCroix comes in, right? He proposes a timeline that's really way out there compared to the standard view.
Yes, LaCroix takes this evidence and pushes it much further back. He looks at geological records, ice cores, tree rings, volcanic layers, geomagnetic data, and argues they point to a truly catastrophic global flood event around 20,000 years ago.
20,000. That's much earlier than anything mainstream history usually talks about for civilization.
Much earlier. He argues, quite forcefully, nothing in the last 11,000 years explains this scale of disruption. He sees signs of massive climate upheaval around that 20,000-year mark in all these different natural records. And then he connects that directly to the ancient flood myths. Zusudra, Noah, Manu in India, Deucalion in Greece. You find them everywhere. He suggests these aren't separate stories, but shared memories of one real global disaster.
So for LaCroix, these myths are basically eyewitness accounts passed down through millennia. Not just allegory, but history. That's a radical claim. Now, okay, mainstream science does acknowledge big climate shifts. We know about the Younger Dryas, right? Around 12,800 years ago. Big cooling, melting ice sheets, sea level rise, major regional floods. That's accepted.
Right. The Younger Dryas impact is well documented. But the standard view generally sees those floods as dramatic, yes, but mostly regional, not the single worldwide civilization-ending catastrophe you hear about in the global myths.
But LaCroix says the Younger Dryas isn't the event.
He argues it doesn't fit the bill. He thinks the Younger Dryas events, while significant, can't fully explain the really profound cultural breaks seen at some archaeological sites, or the sheer scale of the geological markers he points to from earlier. So he proposes this earlier cataclysm, the one around 20,000 years ago. Something big enough to potentially wipe out entire civilizations, leaving only scattered clues like at Tel Fara, and of course, those persistent myths.
Okay, and it's a big if for mainstream archaeology if LaCroix is right, what does that actually mean for how we understand human history? What's the immediate impact?
Well, it completely shatters the standard timeline. The idea that cities first emerged only 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, that goes out the window. It pushes the dawn of complex, organized civilization back by maybe 8,000 years, maybe more. It forces a total rethink of what early humans were capable of.
A whole different story of us.
Exactly. LaCroix puts it bluntly. Flood myths may not be allegory. They may be collective memory of a real devastating event that reshaped the human world. He even speculates about a potential lost culture, maybe a global network of advanced societies that just vanished.
A lost global network 20,000 years ago. That sounds incredible. But, of course, claims like that, pushing civilization back so far, they face a lot of pushback, a lot of skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. Immense skepticism, and understandably so from a conventional standpoint. For now, most archaeologists remain cautious or, frankly, unconvinced. The dominant view is still that humans 20,000 years ago were primarily small, nomadic, hunter-gatherer groups. Maybe sophisticated hunter-gatherers, especially adapting to the Ice Age, but not building cities or forming global networks.
Right. The evidence isn't there yet for cities that old.
Not direct, undeniable proof. Without finding clear remains of cities, complex structures, undeniably dated to that 20,000-year mark, this lost civilization idea, however intriguing, stays on the fringe. The evidence we have, like at Tel Fara, is compelling, but it's often seen as circumstantial or potentially explainable in other ways.
So we're left in this really fascinating spot. We have this incredible evidence at Tel Fara, that flood layer, the advanced artifacts underneath it. We have similar hints from other sites around the world. We have these ancient myths echoing the same kind of catastrophe, and some geological data that seems supportive, yet it's still not enough to rewrite the textbooks. At least not yet.
Exactly. The mystery absolutely lingers. It demands more research, more digging, maybe new ways of looking at the evidence. But that thick yellow clay at Tel Farah, those surprisingly sophisticated artifacts below it, and the echoes of flood legends from Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, the Americas. Altogether, they do seem to whisper, don't they, about a human story that might be far older and maybe far more fragile than we usually think.
A fragile story. I like that. So what does all this mean for you listening right now? How should you think about this?
Well, this deep dive into a potential lost civilization, this possible global flood, it really shows how even the historical stories we think are set in stone can be challenged. New finds, new ideas can potentially rewrite everything.
Yeah, it encourages us all, I think, to maybe look beyond the standard timeline sometimes, to consider that those ancient myths we often dismiss as just folklore. Maybe they hold kernels of truth, real collective memory from a deep, forgotten past. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other chapters of our history are still buried, waiting to be found, waiting to change how we see ourselves?
That really is the challenge for all of us, isn't it? What if those stories, the ones we thought were just myths, are actually faint echoes of our deepest history? Still waiting for us to really hear them, to understand them, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
Okay, one question for you. Could a global flood 20,000 years ago have wiped out an advanced civilization we no longer remember? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.